I've asked myself the question, was a post-mortem performed on the recovered bodies prior to them being handed over to the relatives? Has anybody asked that question? Was a post-mortem performed? Or were these bodies just bagged and handed over? You know, some people might have died not from drowning, but from the inhalation of carbon monoxide, because we are learning that a large number of people were at the bottom of the ship where the engines and everybody were going. So some of them might have died from the carbon monoxide from the engine smoke, long before they actually drowned. You have all those assets. And all you are learning at this particular point in time, and that Gov't's plane went out there to pinpoint the exact location and so on, and then bring it back. All of this time, people are drowning. All of this time, people are floating around the dark waters, you know. That is another thing. And when you listen to the captain and the cries of the captain as he was being led away, the little that he was able to put out there in the public gives you the reason why they are charging him, so that he does not appear in the COI. Because no sensible lawyer, no lawyer worth his salt, not even a bicycle lawyer, would allow his client to go and testify before a commission of inquiry when that testimony could be used against him in a court of law. Not down the road, but right now, because the man has already been charged. Let me tell you something. You all remember the independence when they had 2 boats? Just think about that, and you will think about the chaos that attends to this country. Look at that. Even the ambassador allowed herself to be part of that melee. You had a boat ram-packed with people. Not a single soul was made to register anywhere before they got on that boat. So if that boat sank, God forbid, you would not have known who was on the boat. Now, one positive that has come out of all this is that the opposition, the split up opposition, seems for one moment being able to put aside whatever differences for that one moment and come together in a joint show. And so the opposition got to stop clapping itself on the back and regroup to strategize. I'm sorry to disappoint you. You know, some people say, Jordan, you are negative. I'm not negative. I've been there. I know the opposition that you are faced with. And that opposition doesn't move easily. Ask Desmond Hoyt. A united protest yesterday got 100 people, according to today's papers. 100. And this is where you're talking about all the political parties, civil society, some civil society groups and so on. 100 people. Families who have been affected and so on. 100 people. Had you put out 2,000 people peacefully, 2,000 people yesterday, the government would have noticed. And if you put out 2,000 people at least every day for the next week, the government will move. And not only the government will move, the international community will then begin to take notice. Because prior to yesterday, when the APA came out and so on, I was asking myself, when would the indigenous community of this country stand up to be counted? When? Isn't it time that others carry the fight? Why it is that only African, yes, only African Guyanese are looked upon to carry the struggle for the rest of this country? Do you know that this government did nothing specifically for Africans in the context of the decade? On the contrary, they took away what we could have afforded as the coalition government. They took that away from Ipadaji, took it away. And Ipadaji had to go to court to get a judgment that gave them only the balance for the year in which it was taken away. What happened to the Burima was long in the making, especially without the kind of repairs that was done to the Burima in 2015 when we came in to make it seaworthy. But this is what the PPP government, who has been in power for 34 years, for all about 34 years, knew. All of this is taking place while the head honcho is in Canada, allegedly enjoying the Football World Cup.
Manners and respect to Mr. Winston Jordan. You is a great man to the Guyanese citizen. As a minister to the South America land called Guyana. So much negative, so much propaganda. The PPP are trying to tell upon you, but keep speaking the truth. The truth is always there forever. The best finance minister I ever seen in Guyana. Oh yeah, Lord, please guide and protect him each and every day. He is full of knowledge and experience and things that going on in this country. Jordan is a cool and humble man. He educate and dedicate to the society. Over 30 years he give to we in this ministry. Yeah, yeah. Jordan is for all. Lord, know you will always stand tall. Tall. Yeah. Oh yeah. I am a Guyanese citizen. I never meet you and I never talk to you, but for you good works you have done for this country. I'm singing this song to you, Mr. Winston Jordan. We as Guyanese citizens saying we love you. Yes, we love you. Lord, let no weapon that come against him shall prosper. Lord, you is the God from heaven. You is the God from heaven. Oh, manners and respect to Mr. Winston Jordan. Guyanese, we love you, Winston Jordan. Yeah, yeah.
And then the mother load of them all is the 73 plus people who died in the sinking MV Burimo. Oh, that was such a tragic event. I remember on the Sunday morning, as I was about to board and about to turn off my phone, I saw this message, and reading it, it was, oh, that thing was so sad. So sad, you know. And as I think of it even now, it is sad. All the memories of the Titanic, because you could have gone and see the film Titanic. Those you conjure those memories as you conjure what those people would have felt with the sinking of the Burimo. And in fact, I believe the people on the Titanic had opportunities to jump into rafts and so on. The people in the Burimo had no such opportunity. It was in a matter of minutes, small minutes, and the boat just sank. Now there's the blame game all over, right? But we'll come back a bit to it. I won't want to rehash whatever is already done in the press and so on, but we'll come back to that shortly. I just want to say at this stage, condolences to the relatives and friends for the known deaths, and for those who we don't know as yet, because there are a number of bodies down there. And I think one of the unfortunate things will be a number of the bodies still to be recovered will be children. Will be children, because from all indications, the boat had a large number of children on them, which was not unusual. Which was not unusual. And that, more than anything else, is the one that really hurts. The children who have not lived their lives as yet. But we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that. Just allow me to recall 1 Corinthians 15, 55 to 57. 1 Corinthians 15, verses 55 to 57. Where Paul writes, O death, where is thy sting? O grave, where is thy victory? The sting of death is sin, and the strength of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, which giveth us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. O death, where is thy sting? You know, many people associate those words with Martin Carter, our national poet, not realizing that it's in the Bible. Martin Carter is not the original of those words. It's in the Bible, 1 Corinthians. That what came to mind as I read of all these deaths, and in particular, those that took place with the capsizing of the MV Buramo. I said, I'm going to touch a bit on the MV Buramo today, but I want to ask a few questions or observations, really. You know, the bodies that have been recovered, I've asked myself the question, was a post-mortem performed on the recovered bodies prior to them being handed over to the relatives? Has anybody asked that question? Was a post-mortem performed? Or were these bodies just bagged and handed over? Bagged, tagged, and handed over. You see, this is a very important question. You can't assume that because the ship capsized, that the bodies recovered all drowned or died by drowning. Clearly, all of them, one contributory cause could be drowning. But was that the main cause or the secondary cause? Regardless of the cause, was a post-mortem done? Was a death certificate issued showing the cause of death? Because this is very important for many reasons. Litigation reasons, insurance reasons, because if somebody was had a life insurance, you can't just turn up and tell the insurance company, well, you know, my husband died in the sinking of the Bremo, and now I come to cash in. They're not going to give you. They're going to want to see a death certificate showing the cause of death. And to get the cause of death, you have to be able to do a post-mortem. In all of this, I've heard nothing said about whether a post-mortem was done on the bodies of those found. You know, also, you know, some people might have died not from drowning, but from the inhalation of carbon monoxide, because we are learning that a large number of people were at the bottom of the ship where the engines and everybody were going. So some of them might have died from the carbon monoxide from the engine smoke long before they actually drowned. Because for somebody to drown, they must be alive. At the time when they're taking in water, the lungs will show that they were alive when they're taking water. That's drowning. But if they died before carbon monoxide, water would not be in the lungs, and so the cause of death would not be drowning. It would be, say, death from carbon monoxide, right? Or somebody could have been strangled. you know, or some sort of thing. The long and short is, you know, like for example, one of those heavy, when the ship was capsizing, one of those heavy packages could have fallen on somebody, and at that instant they died. That instant they died. So they would not have died at that particular from drowning. They would have died from a blow, maybe to the head or something. So was a postmortem done? Was a postmortem done? We are not hearing that they had whoever are the postmortem people doing these postmortem. I doubt where the postmortem were done on the bodies, and that the bodies were just handed over and assumed to have drowned. This is a very, 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 very important point, as I said, from legal standpoint, from insurance standpoint, and from any other number of standpoints. From any other number of standpoints, right? So I hope this is something that the lawyers them could take up to find out exactly what has taken place, right? And then, of course, the whole reaction. This is a country with enormous money is unheard of in its history, and yet this is a country that has bought, I think, since 2020, it has bought, I think, 2, if not 3, brand new helicopters. Brand new helicopters. One of which they conspired to crash. I have to say that because they have never issued a report on that crash that killed 5 persons. And we're learning that 2 or at least 1 more of the helicopters are grounded because something burnt out and so on. These are brand new helicopters. Then you have assets that belong to ExxonMobil that are on standby there at Ogle Airport that run every day, ferrying people and so on. And they have rescue helicopters on standby just in case something happened off the FPSO or one of those vessels there. You have all those assets. And all you are learning at this particular point in time is that a distress signal was received by the Timeri. A distress signal was received by Timeri. And that Gov't's plane went out there to pinpoint the exact location and so on, and then bring it back. All of this time, people are drowning. All of this time, people are floating around the dark waters, you know. That is another thing. When I think about this, I think about our ancestors with emancipation coming up. I think of them crossing those dark waters of the Atlantic to come to these shores. And that is what you're conjuring there, as those people are in that ocean fighting for their lives. Babies floating. And in this rich country, we could not mobilize assets to go there, and it's not like the Titanic, you know, where it was difficult at the time in terms of conditions, you know. It was cold, iceberg, and a lot of assets in terms of vessels and would not be close by. You talking about a ship that is just out? It's still within the confines of Guyana, because it says just off the Pomeroon. And you can't get there in a jiffy to save many more people who could have been saved. This is the most disgraceful performance of any government this side of the hemisphere. And still they hold on. And still no accountability. All of these assets, no boat mobilized, no Coast Guard, no anything. First person Forced rescue 5 hours plus after the people were in that waters. And you telling me this is not tugging at your heartstring? This is not moving even those in the government? This is not moving them? Oh man, where's our humanity? Where's our humanity? I understand the government is going to try a rearguard action to think, but at the same time of trying a rearguard action, you have to account, you have to bear the accountability part. Where is our humanity? Where is the government's humanity? All of this is taking place while the head honcho is in Canada, allegedly enjoying the Football World Cup. So nobody is saying he got no right to be there, and he won't have been able to foresee a disaster happening. But you're telling me also that the head honcho is putting himself in such a position that he can't return to the country in a jiffy when there is an extreme emergency. That is what we go to. And what happened to those times when it will be announced that the president is not in residence? In other words, that he's not in the country. The president is slipping out of the country every so often. And there is no announcement that he's not in the country. There is also no announcement that there is an acting president. It cannot be assumed that the prime minister automatically acts as president. No, he has to be sworn in. He doesn't automatically become acting president. He has to be sworn in every time the president leaves these shores. And maybe it is time that that ceremony becomes a public ceremony, recorded and posted. Because there's too often that the president is leaving this country, you don't know that he's out of the country, and you don't know that Phillips is acting as president. So there he is out of the country, then we can find out that he's not in Guyana. And somebody trying to boogaloo, as we call it, that he's out on official business. Man, look, give me a break. Come clean like the Prime Minister of Jamaica. I was there when the Prime Minister was making it very clear that he was invited by FIFA to witness the World Cup finals. And why was he invited? Because Jamaica is contending to host the next Women's World Cup. So he wasn't invited because he was liked by the FIFA president and so on. He was invited because Jamaica was bidding to host next Women's World Cup. And he made it very clear that he paid his own way to go to the World Cup. He paid his own way. His own expenses was met out of his own pocket. He didn't cloak it, obfuscate it that he was on official business and so on in Canada. He made it very clear. And that is the difference. That is the difference between a banana republic and a modern country. That is the difference between transparency and opacity. That is the difference between those who understand the basics of governance and those who feel they're entitled So yes, he was there explaining in quite detail. And he wasn't offending anybody and shouting at anybody and giving people the impression that you're impertinent to be asking those questions and so on. Because you see, Jamaica's a different society to Guyana. Different society. And they have to thank the Lord that they don't have a race problem, the kind that we have here, that is stymieing progress, greater progress in this country. So you have that. And then, of course, they set up this commission of inquiry. Well, as far as I'm concerned, the commission of inquiry is dead in the water. Dead. Dead in the water. Because it's a hoax. It's a hoax. Again, the difference between democracy and entitlement. Everybody understands that the government, that the president has the authority to set up the COI, and that he may have the final say or so on. But there is precedent in Guyana during the crime wave when Jagdeo as president acceded to the requests of consultations to set up the commission of inquiry. And as I recall, that commission of inquiry comprised erudite people like Justice, former Chancellor Keith Messiah. Then there was a woman, I think, who came from Britain or United States or someplace that was part of one of those organizations that formed, I think, the 4 or 3 or man committee or whatever that inquired into that thing. And even though the commission cleared Gov't, I believe Messiah wrote, I think, a dissenting report. But the long and short was that the opposition had an opportunity, and civil society had an opportunity to be part of that commission of inquiry in terms of nominating people, and also in terms of the terms of reference. No such thing. No such thing took place this time around, notwithstanding all the claims and clamor for the widest possible consultation in both the membership composition of that commission of inquiry and the crafting of the terms. I saw some fantastic terms of reference crafted by the likes of the APNU. I saw Terence Campbell crafted some. I saw David Patterson crafted some excellent terms of reference of what it could be. I saw some on Facebook, terms of reference, all of those. And then you ended up, as everybody could have predicted, with the narrowest of terms of reference, inquiring into little to produce a mouse. And to ensure that a mouse will be produced, the composition of the commission of inquiry, even before it starts its work, is in question. Now you're getting more and more details every day about every member of that commission except one, the Polish guy. Whether true or not, the question is, if people are going to start with halos on their heads, then the commission is in trouble. Commission is already in trouble, it's dead in the water. Dead in the water. And it has been compounded by the charging of the 3 people day before yesterday. And when you listen to the captain and the cries of the captain as he was being led away, the little that he was able to put out there in the public gives you the reason why they are charging him, so that he does not appear in the COI. Because no sensible lawyer, no lawyer worth his salt, not even a bicycle lawyer, would allow his client to go and testify before a commission of inquiry when that testimony could be used against him in a court of law. Not down the road, but right now, because the man has already been charged. So they have silenced 3 critical people. 3 critical people. Silence them. Right away. And then you got a DPP running out with a statement claiming how she got the unfettered right and independence. All that is known. All of that is known. All those rights are in the country known. But do you have the tact? Do you have the tact? Are you aware what you are doing? Or are you fully aware of what you are doing? Because when you talk about, oh, there is precedent, the same thing happened with the 2020 elections. You had a trial simultaneous with the COI. Lady, the COI that was conducted, all the people who are charged and before the court went to the COI and pleaded the 5th. They went there and said, on the instructions of my lawyer, I refuse to testify. So when you talk about, oh, there's precedent that for simultaneous commission of inquiry and court cases, where you live. And what you think happened with the COI in the elections thing? It came out with what everybody knew was going to be its foregone conclusion. Conclusions. But you didn't get the benefit of all the people you charge. You didn't get the benefit. You didn't get the guts of what took place. But you get a COI that came out with conclusions that were more or less drawn up before it started. And we, unfortunately, in this country, are victims of these expensive COIs that are crafted to achieve predetermined objectives. So this COI is dead in the water. Dead in the water. And it's made deader still. Yes, I kind in the word, deader still. When the government comes out with this curious approach of telling people, well, we're thinking about making this site a memorial site. And whatever the relatives say, that's what we're going to do. Now, wait a minute. First of all, let me go down a place where I didn't want to go down. How many people were on this boat? We don't know. But let me use your figures. 179, which changed so many times. 73 recovered dead bodies, another 60 something. In other words, you said another 30 something missing, presumed dead. First of all, you don't know those 30 who are their relatives, all of them. You don't know. I'll give you a typical case. I read yesterday where one of the persons presumed dead, but whose body was not recovered, is actually alive. That though his name was on the manifest, he never traveled. He never traveled. He traveled the day before, the Friday, with a friend who was going into the interior. And because the Barbarian had access to communication, he wasn't aware that the Burima sank and that he was presumed to be missing and dead. So his name is on the manifest, but he never traveled. And then you have those whose names are not on the manifest, but traveled. And their relatives also don't know that they jumped on that boat. So while they think that their relative might be somewhere in the interior mining for gold and is expected to come out either by Christmas or so on, they don't know that their relative was on that boat because they never told their relative they're going on that boat. They never told them. They might have told their relative, listen, I'm going into the interior. But they never told the relative by what means they were going into the interior. So some of them may be on that boat. Some people might have made a last minute decision to go on the boat and use their friends to jump on the boat without a ticket. Let me tell you something. You all remember the independence when they had two boats? Just think about that and you will think about the chaos that attends to this country. Look at that. Even the ambassador allowed herself to be part of that melee. You had a boat ram-packed with people. Not a single soul was made to register anywhere before they got on that boat. So if that boat sank, God forbid, you would not have known who was on the boat, who they were, and so on. Look at that melee that you see. People were climbing on each other to get onto the boat. The boat was ram-packed, and even though the journey was short, what if somebody took in on that boat? What if somebody wanted to ease themselves on that boat? You didn't have enough jackets, rafts, toilets, all these things on that boat, but yet still in an official boat going to an official ceremony defied all the maritime laws. And the ambassadors and all of them allowed themselves to be part of that melee. That is what you got going on in this country. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Now, the government now saying they're asking relatives what is their position, whether they want the boat to be salvaged or leave it there as a memorial. Well, listen, first of all, this is not a decision for relatives. Relatives may have an input, but that's not a decision for the relatives. Consideration for the relatives. But listen, the relatives could be told, we will salvage the boat. We will get every single soul who is in that boat or around that boat at the particular point in time, and we will deliver their bodies to their relatives. We will then tow the boat to a sandbank or something, and we will put that boat there forever. We'll anchor it forever and make it into a memorial site. That's how you do it. Go and ask United States and all them, where people will go and visit. Hawaii, when the Japanese sank all those boats, and so you can go there and visit. It's not under the sea. And stop using the divers who come up and tell us how difficult conditions are. There are divers who are looking at recovery of bodies. And they were right and honest in saying conditions down there are difficult for us to recover. Now the government has to move in to stage 2, the salvaging of the wreckage. And don't give us no crap about how difficult. That's 50 feet of water. 50 feet of water. Tell me about no difficulty. They got people who are putting up their hands to come and help you to salvage, but you must pay this time. The French divers were free. The Trinidadian divers were free. They offered, those governments offered free assistance, but now you have to move into the big league of salvaging that boat. Salvaging that boat. But now you must pay. Mr. Phillips claimed that how they're getting offers to salvage the boat. When asked who have made offers so far, he refused to give, I mean, basic information. Refused to give the names of those who have offered to salvage so far. But I got my friend who says that salvaging the MV Burima will give closure to the families of the missing. But he's concerned that more and more of the conversation of the government is giving up, is moving towards giving up. He says to salvage the MV Burima and recover trapped victims when divers face dangerous conditions, the authorities must rely on repositioning the wreck, deploying heavy marine lifting equipment, and use specialized buoyancy lift bags. And this is a man who's an ex-GDF captain of some repute. In terms of repositioning for access, shifting the hull, dragging the capsized vessel into shallow coastal waters, clearing debris, cutting away tangled ropes and internal obstacles, reducing currents, waiting for safer tidal windows to protect dive teams, heavy salvage operation buoyancy bags, attaching large inflatable pontoons to lift the heavy iron hull, offshore cranes, utilizing high-capacity floating cranes from regional industrial partners, then control righting, rotating the ship upright before raising it entirely from the seabed. International and specialist support naval assistance, deploying specialized vessels and engineering teams from neighboring nations like Brazil and Trinidad and Tobago, remote tools, and using unscrewed underwater vehicles where visibility drops to zero. So this is not rocket science. This is not rocket science. And don't give us no nonsense about difficulties and so on. People have removed far more difficult wrecks in far more treacherous conditions. Far more than this here. But the government seems all around to be trying to close all the loopholes that will bring out their lack. Well, that will bring out their irresponsibility in this matter. The closing around loopholes. So this is not natural. This is not natural. Now, one positive that has come out of all this is that the opposition, the split up opposition, seems for one moment being able to put aside whatever differences for that one moment and come together in a joint show. In a joint show. And already they're clapping themselves on the back. I see one this morning, I didn't get to look last night, one this morning extolling the virtues of, we may have differences, but when we put those differences aside and come together, we can, you undo anything. Once you didn't get the government to move beyond their original position, you have done nothing. You have done nothing. But you have demonstrated that if we unite and apply constant pressure, like physics, there will be movement. There will be movement. Not the words unite, because a collective force is greater than a single force. Applied constantly will move the obstacle. Move. Move means displacement. But if you unite and you apply a pressure, not enough to displace, then you have done nothing. You have done nothing. And so the opposition got to stop clapping itself on the back and regroup to strategize. I'm sorry to disappoint you. You know, some people say, Jordan, you are negative. I'm not negative. I've been there. I know the opposition that you are faced with. And that opposition doesn't move easily. Ask Desmond Hoyt. Well, you can't ask he dead. But go and look at what he had to do to move. And because he didn't put in place measures to sustain the pressure, the object rolled right back. That's what happened. The object rolled right back. So you can clap if you want to clap on all this kind of story. That's fine. That's fine. But what is the ultimate objective? Have you achieved that? And to date, the answer is no. In fact, the government is blocking every loophole and is strengthening its resistance. So what it is that you are going to do? As it then says, listen out for protests, regional protests. Listen out. The time for listening out for regional protests gone a long time ago. A long time ago. Is Ashton prepared for a sustained battle? Because you don't win the PPP by these guerrilla tactics. You don't win. Ask Hoyt. So don't tell us about regional, listen out for regional protests. A united protest yesterday got 100 people according to today's papers. 100. And this is where you're talking about all the political parties, civil society, some civil society groups and so on. 100 people. Families who have been affected and so on. 100 people. Had you put out 2,000 people peacefully, 2,000 people yesterday, the government would have noticed. And if you put out 2,000 people at least every day for the next week, the government will move. And not only the government will move, the international community will then begin to take notice. Because let us be very clear, while all the protests might be peaceful and so on, the Americans and the British and the Canadians and the European Union, all of them don't want a situation where the political climate is unstable. They don't want that. And so they will get up upon their sit-upons right now because they are hands off right now. They are hands off. Notice, with the exception of the King of England, who sent out a message of condolence, as I may have missed it, but no other country, no other of the ABC EU countries has sent out any message that I am aware of. I may have missed it, but you tell me if I've missed it. They are on their sit-upon and they are laid back. They ain't taking notice because they figure out the opposition and know what the hell they're doing. Indeed, everybody has this condolence and all this kind of story. But who do you think are the losers? Meanwhile, the government is rapidly trying to reshape the narrative. And I will talk about one of the reshaped narrative just now. So the opposition got to strategize. And again, it's because they are so scattered, it is difficult, it's making it difficult to strategize. If you have one opposition, let us say the PPP were in opposition, they don't have to consult all these little peace people. They will meet at their headquarters or wherever, and they will strategize. And then they will go and inform their groups and so on. Here, matters are made more difficult because you got a piece here, piece there, all over the place. And everybody is Lord and Master. And it is difficult, time-consuming to meet, to strategize, then to go back and talk to people. And then to bring them together. That is the disadvantage of this opposition. And strategy, man, strategy. That is what is missing. Now I turn now to Parliament. We're still on the Burima story, but I now turn to Parliament. So you had this Parliament a couple of days ago. And they had protests before the Parliament, for which the government prepared themselves by blocking out a whole distance, putting barriers a whole distance away from the Parliament, keeping people at bay. Then inside the Parliament, you had people banging desks and all kind of story and so forth. I said again, when you sit down to strategize, you have to ask yourself what it is we are trying to accomplish from that particular action that we are going to set ourselves. How will we measure our accomplishment? And then how will we communicate our accomplishment, lest people deem your action to have been a failure? They are deeming your action to have been a failure because they don't know what were the objectives of your action. So when you come now to the Parliament, I ask myself the question, what were the objectives of the banging on the desk and so on? Was it merely to call attention to the MV Burima plight? Was it to call attention to the carelessness of the government in holding a sit-in? What was it? There was no spokespersons out there who clearly articulated what the demonstration was all about. None. And you know why this is important? Beyond the obvious? Because when was the decision made that you will not participate in the parliamentary activities and devote all your attention to the non-parliamentary activities? When was that decision made? Because you know what has happened now? The government went in there and seized the opportunity. Seized the opportunity to pass the Said supplementary, for which you're talking all the time out there, unopposed. Unopposed, no opposition, $54.5 billion. Now you're going to jump up and holler again, oh, it would have passed anyhow. Check the Hansard, what the Hansard said. It was passed with zero opposition. A zero opposition is like a yes vote, not a no vote. It's like a yes vote. The $54.5 billion is recorded as passed unopposed. Whereas, had you partook of the discussions, got your points out there, showed the injustices that are being created at this particular point in the debate, and when it came time for approval, you signify your objection by calling for a division of the House, in which every single member of Parliament is required to answer yes or no to the passage of the particular bill. So yes, at that particular time, it would have been 36-29. But in the Hansard and in the public view and in the international view, it would have recorded that the 29 opposition people voted down the bill. So you would not go down in history as an accomplice to an injustice. But now you have gone down in history as an accomplice to the injustice of a $54.5 billion bill, supplementary, taken a few months after a $1.6 trillion budget, for which no explanation on record has been given. None. No worry with to advance progress. I dealt with this already. And then your development bank bill passed unopposed. No, yes, you would have supported the bill, but there were so many unfavorable comments about that bill as presented. But yet still you did nothing. You did nothing. Then a bill went to select committee, but we knew that. The president said up front, that bill must go to select committee. The other bills were insignificant, but still, no anything on the record. And then the people outfox you, thumb their nose in your faces, even though I call it a victory for Kidaki, a victory for Annette Ferguson, and like-minded people, that they didn't bring up the ex-president benefits bill. So it's a small victory, but they are hoping and waiting as night turned today that all of this will blow over. And by the time Parliament reconvenes after it goes into recess on August the 10th, by the time Parliament reconvenes post-October, that they will then be able to bring the ex-president's bill in quieter times, in more convivial times, and pass it. Because we Guyanese got short memories, and we Guyanese got divided memories. So kudos to Annette. She was there Tuesday afternoon, notwithstanding all the ruckus and so on. She was out there reminding people that the bill is still there in Parliament, that it can be brought up at any time by the government for its second and third readings, and that the government is playing possum at the moment. They've got all that they wanted to get cleared while the opposition was banging and making noise, and without telling us clearly what was the objective of their actions. I'm not criticizing the opposition, you know. I am just saying to you that these things require a level of clarity that we're not getting. We're not getting. And the government continues to win this PR war. And up to yesterday, prior to yesterday, when the APA came out and so on, I was asking myself, when would the indigenous community of this country stand up to be counted? When? Isn't it time that others carry the fight? Why it is that only African, yes, only African Guyanese are looked upon to carry the struggle for the rest of this country? Why? When would the indigenous community stand up to be counted? Especially since there are a group, who can use their political strength to change many of the conditions that they are under. But they don't want to, or they don't seem to want to. They allow themselves to be divided again. So a lot of indigenous people died. Not only they died, by the way, a lot of them died as a result of the turning over of the boat. And yet still, since then you had a two-shows conference, a most meek conference where they did not show their displeasure. All these captains of their communities refused to show their displeasure at this wrongdoing, refused to stand up for their own communities. Instead, they were there lauding the government for their reaction. My goodness, man. When would you people stand up lauding the government for their, what is it? I don't know if they use the word quick reaction, but for their reaction. And then to throw in thing, they are complimenting the rescuers and all this kind of story. That's the best you can do for your community people, many of whom just died like that. And you say these years that this is taking place, but what are you going to do? What you going to do? Then the government used the old tactic. They announced immediately a $3 billion housing fund exclusively for the indigenous community. And you had a lot of clapping and cheers. You see, a whole set of you people died. And the government used the old tactic. Announced a $3 billion slush fund for housing. And you guys are clapping. Story done for the most part. Story finished for the most part. But you know what? I come again to my own community, the African Guyanese community. What you guys are doing now? We can just continue to gain lament and so on. Yeah? Do you know that there's a second decade of people of African descent that has been announced by United Nations? Do you know that? Do you know that this government did nothing specifically for Africans in the context of the decade? On the contrary, they took away what we could have afforded as a coalition government. They took that away from Ipadaji. Took it away. And Ipadaji had to go to court to get a judgment that gave them only the balance for the year in which it was taken away. The Amerindian people got $3 billion specific housing, and this is in addition to all the funding. I'm not grudging or begrudging the Amerindians for whatever they get. Lord knows they deserve every penny of it. But for our people who came to this country, met the Amerindians, worked like slaves, worked as slaves, got nothing. The second decade, and we cannot up to this, I think we're in the second year of the second decade or something already. We can't get this government to do specific things in the context of the decade. Nothing. No announcement of a $3 billion African fund, housing fund. No announcement of a $3 billion land settlement fund for Africans. No announcement of a $3 billion African scholarship fund or education fund. No announcement of an African entrepreneurial fund. All of this in the context of the decade, the second decade. No such announcements. But you have the Amerindian fund that got billions of dollars every year. You got the low carbon fund where the Amerindians getting 15 or 20% of all the proceeds. You got all these specialized funds for Amerindians. Again, as I said, I'm not begrudging them. I'm not begrudging them. The unfortunate thing is that notwithstanding all of those funds that are targeted to those communities still remain in that low, depressed state that they are in. But I'm saying, even in the context where there's a specialized year, a whole decade for Africans, nothing is done for Africans. Nothing. You got the emancipation coming up, and they're already begging for support to host this and to host that and to bring this portion. So begging in the second decade. But hey, so the indigenous community got to make up its mind whether it's going to remain sleeping, quiet, and look at all these injustices and indignities that are meted upon them, or whether they are going to use their political strength, their political numbers, to advance them politically, economically, socially, culturally, and otherwise. Divided, you will not achieve. Divided, you are not achieved. And the Africans, you are no better off. These two communities remain, and the people who comprise these communities remain the poorest of the poor in this country. So, we move on. And I want to, there's so much to talk, and I missed out last week, so I didn't get a chance to, but I don't know. Let us see where we're going with this thing. So I want to come back to the MV Barima. And I want to look at this specific point in a greater detail. And it stems from a bit of a conversation that was recorded in another chat line that I'm on that really got me upset and going. On the 22nd of July, on another chat line that I happen to be on, Rickford Burke, yes, the same Rickford Burke, in the context of the MV Barama said, quote, "As far as I'm concerned, the APNU-AFC coalition government also allowed those dilapidated, unseaworthy vessels to operate. Successive Guyanese governments failed the people with a lack of development planning. End of quote. That's what Rick Ford said. That is what Rick Ford said. Those are some of the most misguided, uninformed comments coming from someone who knows better, who I thought knew better, but who over time seemed to have gone on a different trajectory. All apparently stemming from some dislike or some hatred of Granger, ex-President Granger. So here is what Vincent Adams, our own Vincent Adams, said in response. Quote, in all fairness though, Rick Ford, the coalition didn't have the money, but it did a heck of a job in maintenance to keep them seaworthy and safe. End of quote. A response worthy of the individual and the knowledge that that individual who was part of the government in the context of being the head of the EPA and who knew. Unlike Burke. So not giving up, Burke responded. They could have taken loans to improve important aspects of human development, including transportation. Missed opportunity, end of quote. That's what he came back with. Again, misinformed, misguided, uninformed. Because here's what I then replied. Quote, whom did you think took the loan that built the militia? Y'all know the militia, we can come to it just now. End of quote. At that stage, he didn't bother to continue any further and he disappeared from the conversation. You see, when they talk in their misguidedness, when they talk and the facts throw them into the face, that is one thing you can't argue with. Facts. He run. But you know, the likes of the Rick Ford Burke and the Sherwin, the cup holder, let's buy into these convenient narratives. They want to shift them blame for the disaster of the MV Barima. The PPP sold the public the idea that the coalition shelved the project for 5 years that they were in office. And that they, the PPP, delivered the MV militia after they returned to office in 2020. Right? That is what they have been selling the public. You know, on this program, at least on 2 occasions, I have given you the history of our relationship with India while we were in office. And if I have to do that again, I will do it again. Because unlike the opposition, I do not believe in guerrilla tactics. I believe in the Colin Powell tactics. Saturate them with the facts all the time, not some of the time. The reality is that India blocked the vessel that Guyana chose while the PPP capitulated for what is now turned out to be, and what we knew to be, an inferior vessel. And I will give you some background. Let me give you some background, because people believe, yes, the Barima is 87 years old, and Kimby on all this story, they are old boats, old boats, right? But what happened to the Barima? What happened to the Bremer was long in the making, especially without the kind of repairs that was done to the Bremer in 2015 when we came in to make it seaworthy. But this is what the PPP government, who has been in power for 34 years, for all about 34 years, knew, but did nothing. I will, as recent as August 28, 2010, in the Stabroek News, here what was the headline. Northwest ferry breaks down in the Atlantic. You hear that? The Northwest ferry breaks down in the Atlantic. That was Stabroek News headline article, August 28, 2010. I will read you a part of it. Northwest ferry MV Kimbio was towed back to the capital last night, a day after mechanical problems left the vehicle stranded in the Atlantic while en route to Region 1. Stabroek News was told that the aged vessel developed a steering problem several hours after departing for Port Kumako. A tug, the Viking 3, was later dispatched to assist in towing the MV Kimbio back to the city. Most of the passengers on board were children. This is August 28, 2010. This was the MV Kimbio. Right? This was the MV Kimbio. Right? Then we have Stabroek News, March 15th, 2012, 2 years afterwards. Headline, another Northwest ferry in trouble. Let me read the passage. Several dozen persons were last evening stranded on board the Northwest ferry MV Kimbio, which broke down soon after departing Port Georgetown for the hinterland. Reports are that the vessel was affected by a recurring mechanical problem with a generator on board that has plagued its operation on the high seas in recent months. That was the 12th, March 15th, right? Couple days before that, on March the 12th, 2012, this was the headline. The government, that is the PPP government, still examining options for Northwest ferries, says Robeson Ben, who was the Minister of Public Works at the time. Ben told Stabroek News that the problem in the past has been financing, but the new Chinese-built ferries will ease some of the issues. He said that the government has looked at a number of options for replacing the vessels, all of them being expensive. See, all of these options were being expensive while the government was wasting money, $200 million on Gaisuko. While the government was wasting money on that project, fiber optic cable, and while the government was wasting money on so many projects that are now in the garbage heap, he was talking that financing was a problem. And the options that they were looking at were expensive. But he did say that within a year or 18 months, this was 2012, so a year would have been 2013, 18 months would have been middle of 2014. A year or 18 months, we shall have a firm position or action on it. So it would have taken 18 months. That would have been the middle of 2024 for them to come up with a decision of how to finance the replacement of the vessels that were running the Northwest. And those were the Lady Northcote, the smallest of the three vessels, the Kimbia and the Barima. Okay? And then we come to the Chronicle, February 28, 2014. Headline, government expects ferry from Inya before year end. So the government was expecting a ferry from Inya by the end of 2014. End of 2014. Okay? As we know by now, it never happened. But he did tell Chronicle, Minister Ben Thursday night announced, right? And this was announced in Parliament when he was replying to a question that was asked by AFC Williams. Y'all remember that guy? He said that the government is now finalizing arrangements for the acquisition of a ferry boat from Inya for the Northwest. Okay? So they were finalizing arrangements. That's what he told them in February 28th, and that they were going to be expecting a boat by the end of 2014. And we know by now that did not happen. Okay? So that is by way of the background into this matter, right? So that's the end of 2014. Now, between January 7th and 12th of 2015, then President Ramotar traveled to Inya for a state visit. And he brought back pledges for a $50 million Ogle bypass road, right? That's the road with the now thing, you know, $50 million US. Then he brought back a pledge of $8 million. $8 million grant for Northwest Ferry. $8 million. And of course, there were other things that were thrown in, like assistance with IT, right? I think they gave us $1 million grant to build an IT lab at UG, which was completed on our the grant was signed and completed on our coalition government. But that was it. That was it, right? I think he also brought a pledge of 10 million loan for the Northwest Ferry. So there'll be 10 million loan and 8 million, let's call it line of credit, and 8 million grant. So total for the ferry was going to be 18 million in all, right? Let us be very clear, as in many other countries, money under Indian line of credit is a permission to buy Indian goods from Indian suppliers. The monies are released by the Exim Bank of India, tranche by tranche, and only for contracts for which the Exim Bank has no objection to. Let us be very clear. So any money that India giving you, it's promotion of Indian goods, Indian suppliers, Indian contractors. Okay? Loan or grant. So I raised this matter before on this thing. Many of them is talk about brotherhood and this hood and all kinds of story. But in many respects, they do the same thing that they accuse the Western countries of doing. Same thing. And when you are in situations like Guyana was prior to oil, there's not much you can do, especially if you don't have a Brazilian type massive population, resources and so on, where you could fight back. Not literally fight back, but in other words, get better, stronger terms. In all of our dealings prior to oil, you can see the notoriously bad terms that we had to accept. And it's no different from brotherhood and sisterhood and them sort of thing. All of them are the same. So, it is yours truly as Minister of Finance who signed the line of credit agreement for $10 million in November 2016. Okay? So Ramatar went there January 2015. The loan had to make its way all through the Luxaba and this place and that place and all this kind of story. And it took almost 2 years from when they made the pledge to Ramatar to when I was able to sign this loan, November 2016. Okay? You know, two things I want to raise here quickly. Might be sideshow. One is that every Indian president of Guyana, whether it be Jagan, Jagdeo, Ramatar, Ali, every Indian president of this country saw it as a must, a necessity to visit their motherland in an official capacity. So Jagan made, after he became president, he made official visits to India, where he was given whatever overseas award they normally will give. Every one of those presidents, as a matter of fact, they got this high overseas award that India gives to their high nationals. Jagan made that pilgrimage. Jagdeo made that pilgrimage in both official and unofficial capacities. Ramatar made that pilgrimage, as I told you in January. Ali made that pilgrimage in 2023 in the official capacity. They all see the need to make that pilgrimage with their affinity. Not with the exception of Burnham. Our other two presidents didn't seem to have that closeness. Didn't seem to project it. And definitely didn't see the need, the urgency to bring Africa into the picture. Burnham made he made visits to India, because he was close to Gandhi. He made several visits. He made, I think, an official visit to India when Gandhi was Prime Minister. He made official visits to Zambia, Tanzania, and so on. But no other president, as I am aware, I may be wrong, made official visits. I know President Granger made a visit very early to Ethiopia in 2015, where he attended a conference. And he made a visit to Kenya, where he attended a conference. But I know of no official visit that he made. So that is one to think about. And the second thing is, you all remember Ramatar was in deep trouble, proroguing Parliament and all kinds of story. But yet still he was able to make an official visit to India, in which he was given support to help prop him up, because that is what they were doing, propping him up before the elections of May 2015. Which international partner allows official business and announces packages just prior to election? But he went to India and he got assistance for the bypass road, for which we never heard about before. We never heard about before. of it being of any priority. I heard about it before when I used to write Jaguar's budgets. They were talking about a bypass road from Ogle to Diamond. And it's in several of his budget speeches. But that was an idea time was far in the distance. But suddenly he went there in 2015 and got money, $50 million for this Ogle bypass road. We don't know how he came up to 50 million. We've never seen a study done on that road or any such thing, but he got 50. And he got this assistance, $8 million grant. Imagine, $8 million grant. That was a huge sum in that time in the context of the circumstances that we were in. $8 million in grant and $10 million loan to get this ferry. Since then. And then, of course, we got assistance, as I tell you, the IT assistance and so on from his one visit. And all this was being given months before an election was due in Guyana. Sometimes we got to learn some things from the PPP. We may not like it and how they do it and so on, but this is politics. And we can't play nice boy in these matters. We got to play their game too, because we've been playing clean games and getting beaten at it. So let we all go down rough. But this is not our leaders, except Burnham, weren't prepared to do this. We think nice by politics is work. So I signed that loan November 2016, right? And it was not until late in 2017 now. So you see how the time going all the time? When you got money, you got to go at the pace of the lender. Now comes in 2017. The Exim Bank of India invited Indian shipbuilders to pre-qualify for this ferry, right? Exim Bank of India. This is a long process. They have to invite bidders to pre-qualify, right? 5 of these forms applied. So all this is taking place in Inyo, not in Guyana. All this is taking place in Inyo. I'm just trying to get you the names of, let me see if I can get you the names of the 5, the 5 who applied. Yes. The 5 who applied were Garden Rich Shipbuilders and Engineers Limited. Number 2, Shaft Shipyard Private Limited. Number 3, Titagar Wagons Limited. Number 4, Vijay Marine Shipyards. And number 5, Cosmos International Limited, right? Cosmos International Limited, right? After reviewing applications on bidders number 1 and number 2, which was Garden Rich Shipbuilders and Engineers Limited and Shaft Shipyard Private Limited. Sorry, after reviewing the applications on bidders on number 1 and number 2, they were deemed pre-qualified by the Exim Bank, right? The other 3 were deemed unqualified. So these 2 now are pre-qualified, right? And they then will be asked to bid, right? Let us be very clear. The Garden Rich Shipbuilders and Engineers Limited is a government entity, right? They do a lot of military work and so on for the government. Shaft Shipyard Private Limited is a private entity, right? It's a private entity. Now, after 2 rounds of bidding, between December 2017 and June 2018, okay? June 2018. So now we have 2015, 2016, 2017. So 3.5 years since Ramatar was promised this money after the state visit. You had two rounds, we had 2 rounds of bidding took place under the coalition government. Our National Procurement and Tender Administration Board approved the award of a contract to Shaw Shipyard Private Limited, right? Shaw, the private entity. The coalition government, an NPTAB, approved them. Their bid came in at $15.6 million US dollars. While the Gressel Garden Shipyard people, they came in at $12.7 million, a difference of $2.8 million, right? But the Garden Shipyard bid was deemed non-responsive. Non-responsive. Remember, this is not about price. This is about who has the less responsive bid. That's how our procurement operates, right? And even though Garden Shipyard was lower by 2.8 million US, they were deemed to be a non-responsive bid by the NPTAB, which is our entity, procurement legal entity. Our cabinet, the coalition cabinet, noted NPTAB recommendations on September the 6th, 2018. What it means by noted, under the procurement law, cabinet in the early days approved contracts in excess of $15 million. But the law also provided that cabinet's approval mandate will phase out eventually. Under the coalition government, we phase cabinet's approval mandate, and the contracts will come for noting. In other words, then the cabinet will review the contracts and would say if they felt that they had some issues there and so on, and will send it back to NPTAB if it had issues. If there were no issues, then it will note the contracts, not approve them. It will note the contracts, right, and send it back to NPTAB for them to notify whoever's the winner on them side. So cabinet did this on September the 6th, 2018. Despite an award being made to Soft, Gressel or Green, I got Garden Reach Shipbuilders via the Guyana High Commission appealed this award, right? Appealed this award. NPTAB, which is our National Procurement and Tender Administration, in a highly unusual move, agreed to have the award reviewed, and they then commissioned an independent team to reevaluate the tenders. This should not have happened, but because it's not our money, because we want to give the Indian Exim Bank all the assurances that everything is above board, everything was done strictly and so on, we said bring in independent. NPTAB brought in an independent team to reevaluate the tenders. That independent team confirmed that Garden Reach Shipbuilders, the bid was non-responsive. Here are the findings of both evaluation processes, both the NPTAB and both the independent team. Here are them. You must listen to this very carefully because it will ultimately tell you why the Malaysia is in dry dock today. So short a period after it came to Guyana, where you have to spend 200 million Guyana dollars. The Malaysia is in dry dock. $200 million got to be spent on various repairs, major repairs to it, and it has not made a single voyage to Port Kaichima yet. So here are the differences. Bid criteria. Design of the proposed vessel. Garden Reach submitted an obsolete design which the TNHD is seeking to replace. The design was not in keeping with current and the bidder took into account modern requirements of the proposed vessel. Bid criteria, basic functions of proposed vessel. The Garden Reach. The Garden Reach LOA was 66 meters. Shaft was 68.75 meters. Breadth, Garden Reach 13.2 meters. Shaft 13.5 meters. Depth, Garden Reach 4 meters. Shaft 4.5 meters. Draft, Garden Reach 3 meters. Shaft 2.6 meters. In every area, shaft is superior. Stability, Garden Reach, damage stability criteria not included. Shaft, damage stability criteria included. Bid criteria, ramp, Garden Reach, no forward ramp included in the design as per the specifications. Shaft, forward ramp included as required. Garden Reach, bid criteria, crane, Garden Reach. Crane was located on the port side of the vessel, unsuitable for the intended use of this vessel. Shaft, crane located on the starboard side, conforming to the current international regulations. Bid criteria, refrigerated cargo, Garden Reach. Provision made for 2 refrigerated containers in the cargo hold, not in accordance with the technical specifications. Shaft, provision made for refrigerated cargo on the deck, plus provision made for general cargo only in the hold. Bid criteria, vehicles storing on the proposed vessel. Garden Reach, design is for vehicles to be stored in the warship position, susceptible to shifting, not in conformity with international regulations. Shaft, design for vehicles stored in fore and aft directions in keeping with classification, society, and international regulations. Bid criteria, hull, side shell plate, 6 millimeters. Shaft, side shell plate, 8 millimeters. Garden Reach, bottom, 12 millimeters and keel, 14 millimeters. Shaft, bottom, 8 millimeters and keel 10 millimeters. However, combined with included wing tanks, creates double plate in cargo hold. Garden Reach, single barrier, obsolete design. Shaft, second barrier as required by international regulations for ocean vessels. Bid criteria, cargo hatch. Garden Reach, raised and located at the forward section of the cargo hold. Raised cargo hatch does not allow for maneuvering of vehicles on deck. Shaft, flush, located at the center of cargo hold for simpler distribution of cargo and easy maneuvering of vehicles on deck. Bid criteria, accommodation. Garden Reach, 8 crew members to be accommodated in 2-person cabins. Only officers are accommodated in individual cabins. Shaft, all crew members are accommodated in individual cabins with individual sanitary facilities in the superstructure. Bid criteria, sanitary facilities for passengers. Garden Reach, 10. Shaft, 12. Bid criteria, safety and navigation. Garden Reach, horizontal view from the bridge conning position does not satisfy the requirements of SOLAS. Shaft, horizontal 360-degree view of the horizon satisfies the requirements of SOLAS. Bid criteria, time for completion. Garden Reach, did not specify completion period for the vessel. SHOF specified 18 months completion period for the vessel. General, tender submissions for electrical, shipyards, rescue boats, warranty, and experience were similar in the two submissions. It was pellucid to both evaluation teams, plus NPTAB, Cabinet, TNHG, and the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, that not only was SHOF's bid superior to that of Garden Reach, but the vessel to be supplied was going to be bigger, safer, better designed, and in keeping with TNHG's plans for the future. Despite the glaring omissions of Garden Reach, they countered that the evaluators should award them as the lowest bidder and allow them to correct the omissions and differences after the contract was signed. Can you believe this? That is what they wanted, and that is what the Exim Bank and all the Indian officials was pushing us to accept. But we countered that NPTAB could not agree to such approach because it was contrary to the Procurement Act of Guyana. Exim Bank acknowledged Guyana's position in this regard and referred the issue to the Ministry of External Affairs of India for advice. Right? Now, that's where it died. Okay? In other words then, despite several communications by myself, Minister of Public Infrastructure, we got the Ministry of Foreign Affairs involved. I went to Mumbai, talked to officials there. Despite all of that, nothing moved. Nothing moved because they were adamant that we must accept Garden Reach, the state entity that bid the 12.6 million. Now, if you want me to do that, why on earth you're talking about bids? You're letting us go through this foolishness about bids and all this kind of thing. Why you don't say, listen, we'll be giving you the $18 million, of which 10 is a loan, but here now, you got to take Garden Reach. Don't let me go through this sun dancing, sango bango, and all kind of story. That's what happened. That is what happened. Rick Ford Burke and all of y'all who like to jump down the throats of the coalition, right? With no information. You don't even ask anything on the side. No. Y'all don't ask. Do you want us to break the rules like how the PPP did? Do you want us to break the rules? The coalition government was adamant that the mistakes of the past should never be repeated. What were these mistakes? The last two vessels that were procured under the PPP administration, which were the MV Kanawan and the MV Sabantu, remember them two Chinese vessels, which plied the Essequibo route, were poorly designed. They were poorly designed. The procurement specifications for these vessels incorrectly stated that they will be used for inland travel. Inland travel in the maritime industry is interpreted to mean travel on freshwater bodies only, which is not the case with the Supanam to Perico route. As a result, the Transport and Harbors Department has been spending $1 million US per annum, monies that they don't have, by the way, for which the government every year has to give them by way of subsidy, They have been spending $1 million US per annum since the introduction of these 2 freshwater ferries to keep them afloat because of procurement errors, right? Because of procurement errors. We were adamant in coalition government how much of the mess we had to clean up. We never asked nobody to be sorry for us, but the mess we had to clean up was enormous. Was enormous. We cleaned enough for us to breathe, but we didn't get a chance to clean all. We cleaned enough for us to breathe. And when the louses like Rickford work and all them bite you, they says them louse that is bite your heart. Misinformed, misguided, but they run to blame coalition. And he ain't the only one. I've seen that with people. They feel this need when they want to blame the PPP to find something under the coalition to blame them for. We don't need company. We as coalition, if we are to blame us. Don't look for finding anything with PPP or somebody else. Blame us. But when we are to be praised, praise us. Don't look for something with PPP to find to praise us too. But that is our people, and I don't know whether it's the Christianity thing or whatever. That is what we have to appear to be equal, or to be given equal treatment, or we want to be not be questioned or seen to be partisan or discriminatory, notwithstanding whatever facts might be in front of us. But that is the position. So by the time the no confidence motion came about in 2018, December, and let me remind you that somewhere around September or October, the Indian government invited members of parliament, Indian members of parliament who were not ministers, invited them to a conference in India, all over the world, right? All over the diaspora, wherever Indians were, and they were not ministers, but members of parliament. They were invited to a conference in India. And the PPP was in opposition, so almost all of their members went. Almost all of their members went. The few who didn't go, numbered among the few who couldn't go, of course, because they weren't Indian, was people like Lubumbo, Jenny, Westford, right? They weren't Indian, so they didn't go. But all of the Indian MPs in the opposition at that time for the PPP, they went. And 3 Indian MPs on the government side also went from the coalition. And I want to blame the AFC, but 2 of those 3 were from the AFC. 2 of those 3 were from the AFC, including the infamous one. They went to that conference, right? So 3 from the coalition and the a whole 18 or more from the opposition. Indian MPs went to that meeting in 2018. I think it was around September or early October. They went to that meeting. Okay? The no confidence motion came soon thereafter. I just saying. Soon thereafter. And so, notwithstanding, I signed that loan in 2016 November. By the time we exited office, August 2020, not a penny was disbursed on that loan and all the other loans that we signed with the Indian government, with the exception of a small loan for pumps, which also had its own problems in terms of the delivery and the specifications. One good friend called it tribal diplomacy. I laughed. But when the government came back into office August 2020, by January of 2021, they were signing an agreement with Exim Bank, no, with the shipbuilders, awarding a contract to guess whom? Guess who? Yes, the very same Garden Reach for 12 point something million. The same 12.something million that is over 2 years old OLD. And there was Mr. Edgell responding to a letter that Patterson had sent out, claiming that the 2.8 million savings or thereabout will be used to build wharves. The same Port Kaituma wharf that can't be built up to today. The same wharf that you're hearing that going to be ready at the earliest in 2017. In 2017, the same wharf. They don't tell you how Garden Reach was able to get this contract when, on the strength of the bidding, they were deemed to be a non-responsive bidder. But they were given it the same way that they awarded a contract to those Indian people to build the bypass road, even though the road cost $100 and something million US, but the Indian government was only putting 48 million because 2 million was used up for the studies. Y'all make it make sense. Stop blaming the coalition because you ain't got facts. Then you bring a boat named Malisha. Right? Malisha sounds to me like an Indian name. If you put the two together, you get militia. It's close to malicious. But this boat ain't named Kurupung or nothing, it's named Malisha. Remember this money that we got paid back, you know. We got paid back the 10 million and we already started paying it back. But anyhow, they bring it, they name it Malisha. When the boat came, it's all that we said it would be, would not be. But they had fanfare. They had fanfare when the boat came. Fanfare and everything else. The boat never sailed one day to Port Kaituma. Why? Because there was no wharf for this boat to dock. There was no wharf for this boat to dock. Then you're learning a whole distress story that I can't go through. Sorry, my time run out already. A whole long story about this wharf, the awarding of this wharf, the design of this wharf. These are the people who don't like studies. They didn't do geodetic studies. They didn't do soil tests and everything. They start building wharf. Wharf start sinking and falling and cracking. But we had the same thing before with Charity. We had the same thing when the whole wharf fall in the Pomeroon. We had that before under the same PPP government. We had the same problems with the Supernam wharf. These are the people who don't like do studies. They just build and cut ribbon. And then you're a Malisha now, operating for less than 2 years, or just about 2 years. They ain't gone to Port Kaituma, it's gone to Kumako. It has been going to Kumako. But now it's gone into dry dock. When you look at the tender for the repairs of Malisha, it's best we buy a new boat. When you look at the things that they have, and in fact, with the sinking of the Berima, they may want to revisit the tender because they may want to look and see this old scrap iron that they bring. We told them it's going to be scrap iron, but they dress it up. A pig dressed up can never be a dog or a lion. It's still a pig. But there you go. Now you're hearing what bad we're in bad, we're old, we got to replace in whole. That's the militia. So the militia is out of service. The Barima has sunk. The Kimbio is on the last leg. The North Coast has been set aside. So what about going to the Northwest now? Huh? You're hearing now, they've got a tug. They have a tug now, will be going carrying goods, but not people. A tug is going to be carrying goods, but not people. How the people going to Northwest now? How? You know, I feel empathy a lot in two respects. One, my first job was with Transport and Harbors Department in 1974. I work at that same goods wharf because the goods wharf is near to the civil engineering branch, and that's where I had my first job. With Belfon was a senior engineer, and Owen Edwards, God bless the dead, who died I think late last year, was buried sometime this year. Owen Edwards was my first boss. He was the engineer. And it was from that same goods wharf in 1978 that I, among a large group of UG pioneers, set sail to the unknown, because most of us never even left Georgetown. Well, I went to Adventure, and then the Escribo Coast, and I've been to Borbies and so on. But that was about it. Now we are heading to some place called Papaya in the Northwest District. And we took the Georgie bundle and we headed to the goods wharf, and we ended up I think we left somewhere around 10 o'clock in the night or something like that. After loading a whole set of lumber and all kind of story,